At Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, the days always began before sunrise. The training grounds were quiet then, just the whisper of the ocean breeze and the rhythmic slap of water against the pier. At 0500 hours sharp, a lone figure would arrive at the firing ranges, moving with practiced efficiency. Sophia Grant wore no uniform, only a set of navy blue coveralls, smudged with oil and powder residue. Her brown hair was always tied into a no-nonsense ponytail, her sharp hazel eyes scanning every detail of the grounds. To most, she was simply the maintenance girl, the one who swept away spent shell casings, patched up bullet-ridden targets, and made sure the elite warriors of SEAL Team 5 never ran out of ammunition during their relentless drills. To them, she was furniture. Reliable, unobtrusive, unremarkable. Sophia preferred it that way. The operators training here, men whose reputations were carved in classified missions, barely glanced at her as they loaded their rifles or discussed tactical scenarios. Their minds were on war zones half a world away, not on the quiet woman pushing a target trolley. None of them knew that Sophia Grant carried a legacy in her blood that could rival their own battlefield legends. Her grandfather, Master Sergeant Robert Phantom Grant, had been a Green Beret sniper in the jungles of Vietnam. 138 confirmed kills, with rumors of many more unrecorded. He had been the kind of soldier whispered about in elite circles, his skill with a rifle bordering on myth. Sophia had grown up under his watch on a remote Montana ranch, where the wilderness became her classroom. While other kids her age learned to ride bikes, she was mastering breath control, reading wind patterns, and calculating bullet trajectories with the precision of a mathematician. Her grandfather drilled into her the belief that a rifle was just a tool. The real weapon was the mind behind it. "Little hawk," he used to say. A true marksman doesn't just shoot. They vanish. They become the wind, the shadow, the thought the enemy never sees coming. By her teenage years, Sophia was out shooting adult competitors in marksmanship events across the Northwest, under an alias, of course. Her grandfather knew the military's doors weren't open to women who wanted to be snipers, so he kept her talent hidden. When she was old enough, Sophia tried to change that. She applied for sniper training after earning a degree in mechanical engineering and ballistics. Her scores broke records. Her evaluations stunned instructors. But bureaucracy and bias shut her out at every turn. The offers she got were for support roles, logistics, tech analysis, not the combat positions she had earned. So she took a job few would expect of someone with her skills, range maintenance at Coronado. It was her way of staying close to the world she should have been part of. She watched and listened, absorbing every tactic, every training method, every piece of intel the SEALs drilled with. She knew she could outperform many of them, but there was no way to prove it, until that morning came. Commander Michael Hayes was the kind of man who seemed born for his role. Broad-shouldered, calm under pressure, a quiet authority in every room. 16 years of operational success had made him a living example of what it meant to be SEAL. His men trusted him implicitly, following him into hostile zones without hesitation. Hayes respected competence above all else. But like many in his generation of special operations, his view of competence was shaped by a career spent alongside men. He'd never once considered that someone like Sophia, someone outside the operator ranks, might possess combat skills that could rival his best shooters. If asked, he'd have said she was good at her job, efficient, professional, but he'd never imagined she might be anything more than that. The day that would change everything began like any other: clear skies, cool air, and the sound of distant gulls. Hayes' team was running advanced close-quarters battle drills as part of their pre-deployment cycle for an upcoming Middle East mission. The exercise had been designed to sharpen their reflexes in complex urban environments. At 0847 hours, the day shattered. The first mortar round slammed into the base's administration building in a roar of flame and debris. A second explosion followed seconds later, sending a shockwave across the training grounds. Within moments, the sharp cracks of small arms fire erupted from multiple directions. "Contact, contact!" Hayes' radio barked with urgency. "Multiple hostiles have breached the perimeter." This is not a drill. The attackers had planned this well. They'd chosen the exact moment of a security shift change, slipping through blind spots in the defenses. From the hills surrounding the base, enemy shooters poured coordinated fire down onto the ranges. Sophia had been setting up fresh targets on the 800-meter lane when the first blast hit. The shockwave knocked her to the ground, grit and concrete dust filling her mouth. She rolled onto her stomach, her hazel eyes immediately scanning the terrain. Years of training, not military, but far older and more ingrained, took over. She noted muzzle flashes from the high ground, counted at least 3 sniper positions, 1 heavy machine gun nest, and movement from spotters relaying targeting data. Without thinking, she began calculating angles, distances, and wind drift. Meanwhile, Hayes' men scrambled for cover behind barriers and equipment sheds. 2 were already down: Robert Cole, the team's designated marksman, with a bullet through his shoulder, and James Carter, their comm specialist, bleeding heavily from shrapnel wounds. The rest were pinned down, unable to maneuver under the withering crossfire. The quick reaction force was still 15 minutes out. 15 minutes in a firefight like this might as well have been an eternity. From the corner of his eye, Hayes spotted something strange. Through the chaos, Sophia wasn't running for cover like other civilian staff. She was moving low, deliberately, making her way toward the storage shed where the range's precision rifles were kept. Her movements weren't panicked. They were tactical, controlled. "What the hell is she doing?" Cole muttered, clutching his bleeding arm. Hayes followed her with his eyes as she disappeared into the shed and emerged moments later, carrying a Mark 11 sniper rifle. But instead of seeking protection near the SEALs, she began heading toward the tall observation tower overlooking the entire engagement area. It made no sense, and yet there was something in the way she moved that stirred an uneasy curiosity in him. "Grant!" Hayes shouted over the gunfire. "What are you doing?" She turned, her expression calm and unreadable even under fire. "Commander, I can take out their snipers from the tower, but I need your spotting scope and your radio frequency." For a moment, Hayes simply stared at her. "You're a civilian. You can't. Your sniper's down. Your team is pinned, and help is 15 minutes away," she said evenly. "You can either let me try, or you can keep losing men until backup arrives." Hayes had led men through some of the deadliest battles of his career, but in that moment, he realized this wasn't an idle boast. She believed she could do it, and something in her tone made him believe it too. "Cole," he called to his wounded marksman, "give her your scope and headset." "Sir, she's not qualified." "I don't care if she's qualified. I care if she can shoot." The ladder leading up to the observation tower rattled under Sophia's boots as she climbed, one hand gripping the metal rung, the other cradling the Mark 11 rifle close to her chest. Every movement was deliberate, fluid, efficient, silent except for the creak of steel under strain. Above her, the tower swayed faintly in the coastal wind, a high perch that would leave her exposed if the enemy spotted her ascent. She timed her climb between bursts of gunfire, freezing when the air hissed with passing rounds, then moving again in calculated bursts. From below, Commander Michael Hayes tracked her every step, torn between 2 instincts, yelling for her to get down before she got herself killed, and letting her finish what she'd started. Around him, his remaining operators exchanged uncertain glances. They were trained to recognize skill in motion, and even through their skepticism, they could see she was no amateur. Robert Cole, bleeding but conscious, muttered under his breath, "Either she's insane, or she's about to do something none of us will forget." Sophia reached the top and slid onto the wooden platform. She didn't rush. Rushing was for people who planned to miss. She unfolded the rifle's bipod with a quiet click, resting the weapon on the edge of the railing. Her fingers moved over the controls of the spotting scope and the rifle's optics like a pianist touching familiar keys. The smell of salt air mixed with the acrid tang of burning fuel from the administration building below. In the distance, through her scope, she found the first target. A sniper dug into the crest of a sandy ridge, his rifle barrel just visible through a break in the brush. "Overwatch to ground," she said into the headset, her voice calm, her breathing even. "I have visual on enemy sniper, bearing 2 o'clock, 600 meters. Wind 5 knots cross from the west." adjusting for drift and drop. Stand by. Hayes keyed his mic. Roger that, Overwatch. Take the shot. She slowed her breathing until the world narrowed to the reticle and the faint shadow of the sniper's head. Her finger tightened, the shot breaking clean and crisp. The recoil nudged her shoulder, the sound sharp but controlled. Through the scope, she watched the enemy sniper drop instantly, his weapon tumbling down the ridge. Target down, she reported. There was a heartbeat of silence on the comms before Daniel Brooks, the youngest in Hayes' team, blurted, "Holy hell, she hit him." Sophia was already moving to her next shot. The second sniper was harder to spot. She scanned the hilltop opposite the first position, tracing faint glimmers of glass, scope reflection. He was shifting for a new firing angle toward the base's gate. Second target, northeast ridge. 640 meters. Minor vegetation cover. Adjusting elevation. Another breath, another squeeze of the trigger. The round slipped through a gap in the brush, catching the sniper just as he leaned into his scope. He crumpled without a sound. Second target neutralized, she confirmed. Down below, Hayes was struggling to reconcile what he was seeing. 2 precision shots, both lethal, in under a minute, from someone the Navy hadn't even considered for combat roles. But the fight wasn't over. A heavy machine gun rattled from the far side of the field, hammering the base's main entrance, where security forces were pinned. Sophia shifted her scope, spotting the gunner crouched behind a shattered concrete barrier, spraying bursts toward anyone who moved. Overwatch to ground. I have eyes on a heavy gunner, 750 meters. Partial cover, minimal movement window. I'll need to time this with his firing pattern. Hayes felt a flicker of doubt. Most snipers he knew would hesitate at that distance, with that little target exposed. But Sophia didn't hesitate. She studied the rhythm of the gunfire. Burst, pause, burst, longer pause. And on the next gap, she squeezed the trigger. The gunner toppled backward, his weapon clattering silent. "That's 3, she said, her tone still steady, still in control. Her radio crackled. "Grant, this is Hayes. You just gave our entrance back to the QRF. Keep going. What else do you see?" Sophia swept the field, her gaze landing on 2 figures moving in a coordinated crouch between rocky outcropping spotters. They were relaying corrections to the mortar team hammering the base. 2 spotters, moving east toward the mortars. 400 meters and closing. Engaging first. She dropped the first with a chest shot before he could reach cover, then tracked the second, leading him by half a step. The bullet caught him mid-stride, spinning him down into the dirt. 5 down, she reported. Mortar team will be blind. By now, the tide was shifting. Without sniper cover, without their machine gun, without spotters feeding them range adjustments, the attackers' coordinated fire broke down into scattered, panic bursts. Through her scope, Sophia could see figures retreating toward the northeastern hills. She could have taken more shots, but Hayes' voice came over the comms. "Hold fire. Let QRF finish it." Sophia exhaled, lifted her head from the rifle, and scanned the field with her own eyes. The adrenaline was still there, but she kept her breathing slow. Her grandfather had always told her, the real sniper doesn't celebrate the shot. They prepare for the next one. From the base of the tower, Hayes watched her descend. She didn't rush. She climbed down as calmly as she'd gone up, the Mark 11 still cradled in her arms. When her boots hit the ground, every SEAL in the vicinity turned to look at her, not with the dismissal she'd seen every day for the past 2 years, but with something new. Respect, curiosity, a dawning realization that they had never really seen her before. Hayes stepped forward, blocking her path. "I need to know," he said quietly. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" She looked at him for a long moment, then handed him the rifle and removed the headset. "My grandfather, Master Sergeant Robert Grant, Green Beret sniper, Vietnam. He taught me everything the military never would." For several seconds, Hayes said nothing. He simply stared, the battlefield noise around them fading under the weight of what he'd just heard. "You've been working here 2 years, he finally said. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" She gave a faint shrug. "When would I have told you? No one ever asked." The quick reaction force arrived minutes later to find the fight over. Enemy forces neutralized. SEAL Team 5 alive and intact, thanks to the woman who had been sweeping their brass and patching their targets. Hayes knew this wasn't just luck. This was skill honed over decades, hidden in plain sight. And now that he'd seen it, he wasn't going to let it disappear again. The gunfire had faded, leaving only the muffled clatter of distant vehicles and the hiss of wind over the smoking range. The once-ordered training ground was now a sprawl of debris, shattered barriers, splintered target boards, and the scorched remains of equipment caught in the blasts. Sophia stood off to the side, her rifle resting on the ground, the scope still smudged from her cheek. The rush of combat was ebbing, replaced by the hollow quiet that always followed violence. Around her, the SEALs moved quickly, checking the wounded, sweeping for any stragglers, and reporting to Hayes over comms. The quick reaction force had secured the perimeter, rounding up the last attackers who hadn't managed to flee. Hayes caught her eye across the range. He walked over, his boots crunching on gravel and broken brass, his face still taut from the fight. "You saved us," he said. Not as an exaggeration, not as flattery, just as a fact. Sophia gave a slight shake of her head. "You saved yourselves. I just made sure your snipers weren't aiming back." "That's modest," Hayes replied, "but not accurate." He studied her for a moment longer. "Walk with me." They moved away from the others, toward the observation tower that still loomed over the range. Hayes stopped halfway there, leaning against a concrete barrier pockmarked with fresh bullet impacts. 2 years, he said quietly. 2 years, you've been here. I thought I knew everyone on this base who could handle a weapon. I was wrong." Sophia crossed her arms. "You weren't wrong. You just never looked." Her tone wasn't bitter, but it carried weight. Hayes felt the truth in it. He'd walked past her hundreds of times, maybe offered a polite nod, maybe said nothing at all. She had been part of the scenery, efficient, dependable, invisible. Now he couldn't stop replaying the last 20 minutes in his head. Her calm voice over the radio, the perfect shots, the way she had moved like she'd been born in combat gear. The medics arrived, weaving between damaged structures. Robert Cole was loaded onto a stretcher, grimacing as they stabilized his arm. James Carter was patched up enough to walk with assistance. Neither man took his eyes off Sophia as they passed. Daniel Brooks approached, still flushed with the adrenaline of surviving an ambush. "Ma'am," he said awkwardly, "I've seen trained snipers miss easier shots. What you did up there, I didn't even know it was possible in that time frame." Sophia offered a small smile. "It's possible when you've been practicing your whole life." Brooks hesitated, then asked the question everyone seemed to want to know. "Why aren't you one of us?" "Because nobody gave me the chance," she answered simply. The after-action debrief began in the operations building 2 hours later. The smell of burned electronics still hung in the air from the earlier explosions, but the communications room was functioning again. Hayes stood at the front of the table, flanked by his surviving operators. Across from him sat the base commander, Captain Warren, and 2 intelligence officers scribbling notes for the official report. The briefing was methodical: enemy numbers, weapon types, attack timing, estimated planning methods. But when it came to the decisive moment, Hayes didn't hesitate. The turning point was when civilian range technician Sophia Grant acquired a sniper rifle, ascended the observation tower under fire, and neutralized 6 enemy combatants in rapid succession. Those targets included both hostile snipers, a heavy machine gunner, and 2 mortar spotters. One of the intelligence officers looked up sharply. "Civilian." "Yes," Hayes said evenly. "And without her intervention, we would have suffered more casualties, possibly complete loss of the team." Captain Warren frowned. "Commander, do you understand the implications of what you're saying? You're crediting an unqualified, non-military personnel with combat actions during an active engagement." "With respect, sir," Hayes replied, "she was more than qualified. She just didn't have the paperwork." The tension in the room was palpable. Regulations weren't built to handle something like this. Warren glanced at Sophia, who had been silent since the debrief began. "Miss Grant, how exactly did you know how to handle that weapon under combat stress?" She met his gaze without flinching. "My grandfather, Master Sergeant Robert Grant, Taught me everything he learned as a Green Beret sniper in Vietnam. I've been shooting longer than some of your best marksmen have been alive. I just never wore the uniform." The intelligence officer's pen hovered midair. "So, you have no formal military sniper training?" "No," Sophia said, "but I've trained for it my entire life." After the meeting, Hayes found her outside, leaning against the hood of a parked Humvee. "They're not sure what to do with you," he said. "You're not in the system, you're not on the roster, and yet you did what most trained snipers couldn't do in that time frame." Sophia shrugged. "They'll probably decide to pretend it never happened." "I won't let that happen," Hayes said firmly. "You belong in the field, Sophia. I've led men all over the world, and I've never seen anything like what I saw today." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing whether to believe him. "Words are easy, Commander. Change is not." "Then I'll make the change," he promised. By evening, word had spread through the base. Operators who'd barely noticed her before now stopped to speak to her, offering nods of respect, handshakes, even quiet thanks. It was awkward at first. Some were embarrassed by how they had overlooked her. Others were simply curious, hungry for details about her training. Sophia answered politely, but she didn't bask in the attention. This wasn't about recognition for her. It was about proving, if only to herself, that she had been right all along, that she could do it, that she was what her grandfather had always believed she could be. That night, in her small on-base quarters, she cleaned the Mark 11 before returning it to the armory. Every pass of the cloth over the metal was careful and deliberate, the way her grandfather had taught her. She remembered his voice from years ago. "One day, little hawk, the world will see you for what you are. But when that day comes, don't waste time gloating. Reload." She smiled faintly at the memory. Today had been that day, but she knew it was only the beginning. Across the base, Hayes sat in his office, drafting a report he knew would stir the chain of command. His request was clear: immediate consideration for Sophia Grant's enlistment, bypassing standard entry procedures, and placement into advanced sniper training. He wrote it in the blunt, uncompromising style that special operations respected. Grant's actions under fire were decisive, skillful, and beyond the capability of most trained military snipers. Her skills are a rare asset and should not remain untapped due to outdated perceptions of qualification. When he finished, he sat back in his chair. He had no illusions. This would face resistance. The system didn't change easily, but he'd seen too much today to stay silent. Tomorrow, he'd start pushing. Hard. 3 days after the attack, the base looked almost normal again. The debris was cleared, the bullet holes patched, and the burned walls painted over. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Sophia felt it every time she walked across the training grounds. The glances were different now, not dismissive, but calculating, almost respectful. Operators she'd once been invisible to now nodded at her in the mess hall, asked her questions about wind drift, even sought her opinion on their shot groupings. It was flattering, but it also felt fragile. Respect earned in a firefight could fade just as quickly in the politics of the military, and politics were already moving against her. Commander Michael Hayes was in Captain Warren's office again, his voice measured but hard. "I'm not asking for special treatment," Hayes said. "I'm asking for recognition of ability. Grant can shoot at a level that puts her in the top 1% of marksmen I've seen in my career." Warren leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Commander, I'm not disputing her skill. But skill isn't the only qualification for what you're suggesting. She's a civilian. No enlistment record. No prior service. No training credentials. If we bypass the process for her, we set a precedent we may not be able to control." "That's the problem," Hayes replied. "You're more worried about precedent than capability." "Capability means nothing if the chain of command can't rely on proper structure," Warren said. "Besides, how do we even know what she did wasn't a fluke?" Hayes' jaw tightened. "You think 6 perfect shots under live fire was luck?" "I think," Warren said, "that extraordinary claims require more than one incident to prove they're repeatable." Later that afternoon, Hayes found Sophia at the 800-meter range. She was alone, methodically swapping out damage targets, her motions as smooth and precise as ever. "They don't believe it," Hayes said without preamble. Sophia didn't stop working. "I know. I can see it in their faces. They respect me, but they don't trust me." "They want proof," Hayes said. "Not in a firefight, not in chaos. Proof in a controlled environment. I told them you'd give it to them." She finally looked at him. "A test. A demonstration. They're going to try to make you fail. That's how they'll justify ignoring what happened last week." Sophia's lips quirked in something between a smile and a challenge. "Then I won't give them the satisfaction." 2 days later, the test was set. Officially, it was an evaluation exercise to assess suitability for advanced marksmanship consideration. Unofficially, it was an obstacle course designed to break her. It would involve 10 targets at varying ranges from 300 to 900 meters. Some stationary, some moving. She would have to engage them in a set order, while adjusting for changing wind conditions and artificial distractions. A squad of instructors creating noise, dust, and stress to simulate battlefield pressure. They'd scheduled it for late afternoon, when the heat shimmer distorted sightlines and the crosswinds off the ocean were at their most unpredictable. As Sophia prepped her rifle, she could feel eyes on her. Operators leaned on barriers, instructors crossed their arms, and a few skeptical officers stood at the back, clipboards in hand. Hayes was there too, arms folded, his gaze steady on her. "Remember," he said quietly, "this isn't just for them. This is for you. To prove you can do it when they want you to fail." She chambered the first round. "Commander, I already know I can do it. I'm just letting them catch up." The first target was easy, 300 meters, no wind interference. She took it in 4 seconds flat, the bullet punching dead center. The second was 500 meters, half hidden behind a fake wall. She waited for the moment the silhouette stepped into the open and sent it spinning. The third was the first real challenge, a moving target at 650 meters, crossing left to right with a random stop-and-go pattern. Sophia tracked it through the scope, calculated the lead, and fired just before it reached its next pause. It dropped instantly. From the sidelines, one of the skeptical instructors muttered, "Beginner's luck." By the 5th target, a 700-meter prone silhouette partially obscured by brush, the murmurs were quieter. By the 8th, even the doubters were watching without blinking. She didn't rush any of the shots. She treated each one like it was the only thing that mattered. She adjusted for wind shifts mid-breath, corrected for mirage distortion, and anticipated target movement as if she'd seen it all before. Because she had. When the 10th and final target fell, a 900-meter steel plate barely visible against the dunes, Sophia exhaled and lowered her rifle. The range master called the time. 5 minutes, 32 seconds. All hits. All lethal zones. Silence hung over the range for a heartbeat. Then slowly, Hayes began to clap. Others joined in, operators, instructors, even a few of the clipboard officers. Not all of them, but enough. Sophia didn't smile. She simply began clearing her weapon, the same way she always did. But the moment didn't last. Half an hour later, as Hayes was speaking to Warren about the results, the base's alert sirens screamed to life again. "This is not a drill," a voice boomed over the loudspeakers. "Security breach on the north perimeter. All personnel, respond immediately." Hayes' hand went to his comm. "Talk to me. Control. What are we looking at?" The reply was grim. "Unknown number of hostiles. Small arms fire reported. 2 guards down. They're moving toward the storage depot." Hayes turned to Sophia, who had already slung her rifle over her shoulder. "Looks like you get a second test." They moved together toward the north perimeter, boots pounding over the tarmac. The crack of gunfire grew louder with each step, punctuated by the shouts of security teams trying to pin down the intruders. From the corner of her eye, Sophia saw movement along the tree line, a glint of glass. Sniper. She dropped to one knee, unshouldered her rifle, and sighted in. The enemy sniper was crouched low, adjusting his position. She didn't wait for Hayes' order. The shot rang out, the figure collapsed, and the gunfire from that direction went silent. Hayes didn't need to say it. This wasn't a fluke. This was who she was. The chaos at the north perimeter ended as abruptly as it began. The intruders, a small but organized group of armed saboteurs, were either neutralized or captured within minutes once the QRF joined the fight. But everyone who'd been there knew the turning point had come earlier, when one well-placed shot from Sophia Grant had cut down the enemy sniper, holding the high ground. Hayes saw it for what it was, the second undeniable proof the brass had demanded. No excuses, no fluke theories, just skill under pressure again. By the time they returned to the main compound, the base was buzzing. Operators swapped versions of what they'd seen. How she'd spotted the sniper before anyone else. How calm she'd been under fire. How she delivered the shot, without hesitation. Sophia didn't linger to hear it. She walked straight to the armory, signed the rifle back in, and disappeared into the quiet of the maintenance shed. Hayes found her there an hour later. She was sitting on an overturned ammo crate, tying her hair back after washing the grit from her face. "You've made my job easier," he said, leaning against the doorway. "How so?" "Now I don't have to argue hypothetical scenarios with the brass. They've got reality. Twice." She gave him a wry look. "And they're just going to roll over and hand me a sniper billet?" "No," Hayes admitted. "But now, if they say no, they'll have to do it in writing. And that's a lot harder to defend when I drop your results in front of the review board." The board meeting came 2 days later. It was held in a sterile conference room deep inside the operations building. The walls were bare except for a single flag, the table long enough to seat a dozen officers. At one end sat Captain Warren, flanked by 2 senior personnel officers and a civilian liaison from the Department of the Navy. Hayes was at the other end, Sophia beside him in her standard coveralls, unchanged, as if daring them to see her as she'd always been. Warren opened the proceedings with a clipped summary of the incidents: the attack on the training range, the North Perimeter breach, and Sophia's role in both. The personnel officers nodded, reviewing printed reports and still-frame images captured from security cameras. One of them finally looked up. "Miss Grant, do you understand that what you did, both times, falls outside any authorized role for a civilian?" "Yes," she said. "I also understand that doing nothing would have cost lives." The civilian liaison adjusted his glasses. "We're not questioning your intentions. We're questioning whether bypassing standard protocol is in the best interest of the Navy." Hayes leaned forward. "With respect, sir, standard protocol doesn't produce someone like her. You could run 1,000 recruits through sniper school and never get this level of instinct, calculation, and calm under fire." The room went quiet. Warren's gaze moved from Hayes to Sophia. "Let's say we agree. What would you want, Miss Grant? You've been offered a commendation already." "I'm not here for a commendation," she interrupted. "I want a place where my skills aren't wasted cleaning up after people who don't even know I can outshoot them." There was no arrogance in her tone, just plain truth. Hayes saw 2 of the officers exchange glances, maybe surprise, maybe grudging respect. After another moment of silence, Warren spoke again. "You're asking for a direct commission. That's a rare path. But given the circumstances, we're prepared to make an exception." The decision wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive enough. Sophia Grant was offered a direct commission as an ensign, with immediate assignment to advanced sniper training. Her service record would reflect both engagements as combat actions under extreme circumstances, fully credited toward operational experience. When the meeting adjourned, Hayes walked beside her down the long corridor, the weight of the moment settling between them. "You know," he said, "most people spend years fighting for what you just got in a week." She smirked faintly. "Most people don't get lucky enough to have 2 firefights in the same week." Hayes shook his head. "That wasn't luck. That was you being ready when it mattered." Weeks later, the transformation was official. Sophia traded her coveralls for a uniform, her name stitched above a row of empty ribbons that wouldn't stay empty for long. She entered advanced marksmanship school with a mix of curiosity and skepticism from her instructors. Curiosity about her record, skepticism about whether it could be replicated under controlled training. She answered them the same way she had answered the attackers at Coronado, with performance. Perfect scores. Timed drills completed faster than most veterans. Wind calls so precise, they seemed premonitions. The whispers among the trainees turned into quiet nods, then open admiration. By the end of the first month, No one doubted why she was there. Hayes visited one afternoon, watching from the observation deck as she engaged moving targets at 900 meters. He didn't interrupt until the final round had been fired and the targets all lay still. "You've adapted well," he said. "I've been adapting my whole life," she replied, lowering her rifle. "This just feels like I finally stopped hiding it." He studied her for a moment. "You know, I've been thinking about that first day we really met. I realized something. The most dangerous assumption I made was thinking I knew what the people around me were capable of just by looking at their job title." Sophia smiled faintly. "And the most dangerous assumption I made was thinking that if I just kept my head down, the right people would notice eventually." Months later, Sophia was no longer the ghost in the background. She was Lieutenant Junior Grade Sophia Grant, assigned to the Navy's elite marksmanship program, not as a student, but as a future instructor. Her first class was a mix of men and women, seasoned operators and fresh recruits. She told them the same thing her grandfather had once told her: the rifle is just a tool. The real weapon is your mind. She didn't talk about her past, or how she'd gotten there, but the lesson was in her presence. Somewhere in the back of the range, Hayes watched her with quiet satisfaction. He knew that her story wasn't just about shooting. It was about seeing what others refused to see. And that was a skill the military needed as badly as it needed good marksmanship. Before leaving that day, he stopped by her side. "You proved something to me, Sophia," he said, "that the most valuable people in any unit aren't always the ones we see coming." She met his gaze. "And you proved something to me, Commander, that sometimes the right leader will fight to make sure the invisible doesn't stay invisible." They shook hands, a quiet acknowledgement of battles fought together, both on the field and off. In the years that followed, her name would appear in reports, commendations, and training manuals. But to those who'd been there that morning at Coronado, she would always be remembered for the moment she climbed a tower in maintenance coveralls, carrying a rifle she wasn't qualified to use, and changed the course of a fight in 20 minutes. And somewhere in the quiet of her thoughts, she carried her grandfather's voice: "Don't waste time gloating. Reload." Because she knew there would always be another fight, not just against enemies, but against the blindness that let talent go unseen. And she would always be ready,